Are you a current or future physician assistant wanting to learn more about finances? Then join me on this journey to become a PA the FI way. Hi, my name is Kat, and I'm a practicing certified physician assistant who will be your host. It took me 5 years after I started practicing medicine as a PA to thoroughly dive into my personal finances after I discovered the concept of financial independence. I want to use what I have learned to help you avoid some of the financial mistakes that I have made while sharing some of the financial wins that I have had along the way. Join me as we discuss financial strategies to guide you to becoming a physician assistant on the way to financial independence. Welcome back, everyone, to the PA the FI Way podcast. We have a very special guest for today's show. We have McKenna joining us for the episode today. She is a PA as well, and I'm excited to share her story about financial independence and what she has learned over the past few years. Welcome to the show, McKenna.
Thanks, Kat, for having me.
Let's get started with sharing a little bit more about yourself. Do you mind sharing how long you've been practicing as a PA? A little bit about your career so far, the different specialties you practice in, and those types of things?
Yes, of course. So I started practicing as a PA in the spring of 2018. My first job was as a multi-specialty surgical first assist. So I went around to different ORs all over the county and just helped whichever surgeons needed an extra set of hands in the OR. I did that for about 2 years, and then I transitioned to a total joints practice where we did hip and knee replacements. I was there for about a year and a half. I took a gap for a little while from healthcare, and then it came back to medicine, doing laser tattoo removal for about 5 months, and then now I currently work in men's health.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive a little bit more into that gap, that sabbatical that you took a little bit later in the episode, and I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that. Going back to growing up when you were younger, it sounds as though you're fortunate to have learned some of your financial knowledge from your family, and not everybody is as fortunate with that. Do you mind sharing a little bit about the lessons that you learned and how you learned about finances when you were younger?
Yes, definitely. So I will say I had some privilege in that I had a mindset in my family that there was no doubt that I was not going to be a high income earner or that I wasn't going to be successful in some regard. I think my family just had that culture of we work hard, we do well. And then I, in particular, had my oldest brother. He had some rather lofty dreams for a high school boy, I think, in terms of owning his own business and when he wanted to purchase his first house and things like that. We enjoyed playing games like Cash Flow, which he always beat me at, which explains a lot. So I think my goals were a little more unrealistic, and I was like, oh, I'll just pay off my student loans right when I graduate. But there at least was some sort of semblance of hey, we have ideas for how money should be managed. Some of the more nuts and bolts, I was fortunate enough to, if my family didn't know, I had friends, family who did, and they've been super kind along my journey as well.
And if any of the listeners aren't very familiar with Cash Flow, do you mind just generally sharing what that game is like?
Yeah, it's it's been a long time. You're trying to escape the rat race I believe it's by creating passive income. So there's all these different investment opportunities, and you decide whether they're a good deal or not. And it's kind of like real life honestly.
That's great. I'll see if I can find a link on Amazon to share that in the show notes. If they still make it, I think it's still available.
I hope so. There's a kids version too, which I just I'm all for that. So I hope it still exists.
Cool. And do you mind sharing when you first learned specifically about financial independence? And then once you did learn about that concept, what seemed to draw you towards that concept?
So I got introduced to Mr. Money Mustache by my neighbor in my college dorm. She sent me the Shockingly Simple Math of Early Retirement article. And I liked the concept of it in terms of I liked the idea of the freedom and being just financially set. But I let that sit on the shelf while I was in college. I was like, all right, that's going to be for when I have income. And then I was really drawn to the concept of financial independence in general because I was a high school student with parents who were in the real estate industry during the 2008, 2009 housing crisis. And that was not pleasant. And I wasn't even the adult having to deal with that. And so I just didn't want to be in a place ever where I had to work around the clock to keep on the lights, to keep people fed, and to keep a roof over our heads. At the time, I felt like there were opportunities that really got missed, and I just didn't want to be in that sort of stressor. So to have that security with money was very appealing to me.
Sure, that's very understandable to try to lessen your pain or lessen the feeling of stuckness that
Yes.
people who live paycheck to paycheck or under a lot of financial stress can find themselves in. So that's really interesting and definitely a bummer that your parents had to experience that with that situation. But how did they do after that crisis overall? Did they eventually recover well from that with their real estate and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. They're about to early retire.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And let's fast forward to you graduating from PA school in 2018. How much debt at that time did you have for student loan debt? And then with that amount of debt, how did it feel when you had that amount of debt when you first looked at it?
So I looked up the exact number because I'm a numbers junkie. I had $168,867.75 in loans.
Wow.
About 21,000 of that was actually from my parents. I had a long time in between graduation and when I started my first job. So they gave me a loan to help float that time as well as to help me buy my first house. So in total, around 145 was actually student loans. But honestly, it depended on the day. Sometimes it just felt like this is what happens when you go to PA school. I bought a six-figure salary with 6 figures of student loan debt sort of situation. But other days it felt like this like big obstacle in my FI journey, and I was frustrated with the things that I couldn't do because of my student loans. I had a house and I wanted to put in a backyard, and I was like, well, I can't do that. That's going to slow down my FI date, or I'm going to be in debt even longer. So it really just depended on the day.
Yeah, definitely. Can definitely feel like there's lots of ups and lots of downs. And some weeks you might feel motivated, other weeks you might feel like this is an overwhelming amount.
Yes, for sure.
And how many total years did it take you to pay off $168,000?
I paid them off in January of 2022.
Huge congrats on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And when you were working on paying them off over that time, how did you do that? What strategies did you use? Did you focus on any certain steps or any certain goals to help you with that?
I think a lot of it was like how to navigate those ups and downs, and you got to make it kind of fun. So for me, fun means spreadsheets. And so I made a spreadsheet that would show, oh, if I put an extra $500, like here's how it changes my loan payoff date. I also did a little coloring sheet that like every petal was $1,000. So I got to color it in over and over again. I think it's also important though that I found a job that I had a high income with a bonus structure. And so there at least was built in opportunity for me to earn extra income. I also kept it fun and that I had a little bit that was fun money versus just completely sticking myself in this like have beans and rice lifestyle. Um, I kept my college car. That was a big expense. I really didn't let that lifestyle creep up besides the house. I will say besides the house. I rented out my guest bedroom. And then eventually, once I was like, this house is still too big, I downsized twice and ended up going from a 1,400 square foot house to a 300 square foot studio. So just cut my living expenses.
You touched on a couple things there.
Yeah.
One, that gamifying the process can be helpful for people where they add a little bit of fun to it. And for you, spreadsheets, not everyone can find spreadsheets to be super fun like you, right? But I love that you did that. And I also liked how you chose to not deprive yourself and totally live on ramen or beans and rice, like you said, throughout that whole process, because it can be several years when you're paying off that significant amount of student loan debt. And I was going to ask you, with your bonuses that you received, did it vary with your bonuses, or did you have a set amount, either a set dollar amount or a set percentage of this amount I am going to use more so for fun or to add more joy or more value in my life, and then this amount I'm just going to be shoveling towards my student loans?
Yeah, so I believe my split at the time, it was either 80-20 or 75-25 of loan money versus fund money from every extra bonus check. And my bonus checks were super separate, so it was really easy to do that
Nice.
now. Yeah.
What were some of those things that you chose to spend that money on that added more value or more joy in your life at the time?
I am really a person that likes quality things, and I like my living space to just be a calming and restful space. The two things that I just had to laugh about actually is I made some spice jars, and they're now a wall feature. They're hexagon glass, beautiful spice jars. And then our Roomba was a big one. That just like in terms of time savings, that's some of the best couple $100s I've spent over however long ago that was. Those are the big ones. And then for me too, just I tend to be more frugal. And so I actually had a hard time spending that money, but it was easy in terms of opportunities of like, oh, I don't say no to going out to dinner with friends. That's what this money can be for. And just little treats for myself. I'm like, oh, would I put this on a Christmas list? Let's just kind of grab that for myself. Maybe a little trip here or some coffees, things like that.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned that it was hard for you to spend money, and that's super true with people who tend to be more on the frugal side of things, myself included. I can delay gratification all day long and never spend anything. And it really is essential that you also learn the skill to spending money too, especially after you start climbing yourself out of that hole of student loan debt or other consumer debt, if you have that too, where you need to be able to transition from the scarcity, limited, frugal mindset and eventually able to spend money on those things that save you time, like the Roomba, or bring a little bit more joy to your life.
Yes, definitely. And that has been probably where my last 2 years have been in terms of like learning the skill of spending and what joy it can bring to my life.
For sure. Let's go back to the fact that you downsized twice from about 1,400 eventually down to 300 square feet. Could you share how you did that, what decision process you went through to make those decisions, and then what you learned in the process of downsizing?
Yeah, so the first move was when I ended up selling my house. And what had happened is I had taken a pay cut to take a job that had fewer working days. And what that meant for me is that I almost put myself paycheck to paycheck because of my student loans and just what everything costs. And that was the one spot that was left. If I wanted to not be in student loan debt for 10 years, I needed to cut something. And so I made the decision to sell the house and went into a one bedroom apartment, which was maybe 700 square feet or so. That wasn't actually that difficult because as I was looking at my house, I realized how much of the house I wasn't using on a daily basis. And so that transition was pretty smooth.
And then did you learn anything throughout the process of downsizing with the benefit of hindsight now and insight that you'd have for people that are considering downsizing?
Yes. One is it's just stuff. A lot of it's super replaceable. It also amazed me how much time I freed up. I used to spend my entire Saturday cleaning my house every week for several hours. And when you live eventually in 300 square feet, you're like, I can do that 5 minutes every day. And I just have so much time. And you learn that there's a lot of things that we just have come to think are really normal and necessary in life that just aren't. Especially when I made the jump down from 700 square feet down to 300 square feet, I actually moved in with another person at the time. And so it was really just like, how do we condense? And you get to be creative on how many kitchen tools can I use in more than one way? We didn't own a television, and I still don't own a television to this day because I just got so used to watching things on my laptop and wasn't that big of a deal. and just you get to be really creative. And you also get to really enjoy everything that's in your space because you've gotten to decide very intentionally, is this worth square footage in my little tiny box? And it better be really high value. Otherwise, you're going to feel super overwhelmed. And so when you get to walk into this space that is easy to maintain, it has everything you love, and it helps you reach your financial goals, like it's just magic because you just feel like you have this superpower and you can do absolutely whatever you want and you're financially okay, even if it looks a little funky to the rest of the world.
Yeah, the decision to downsize can look interesting and unusual to people around you for sure. But it's important to recognize that that's absolutely okay. It's your life that you're living, and you need to make the decisions that work best for you in the place that you're in as well. I'm also curious, you touched on a lot of different pros and benefits to downsizing. Are there other benefits that you have found with trying a minimalistic lifestyle?
I think now, again, like I kind of mentioned that I have this superpower of I know that I can live in 300 square feet comfortably and be fine. So for right now, like I'm actually in the same process. I'm about to downsize again and live in an RV and cut my living expenses down a third. And there's no fear about it. I'm like, I can do this. It also saved money, just kind of as a side note, of when you have less stuff, it's cheaper to move. So we moved across the country with just what fit in two sedans. It just opens up all of these different, it's just everything is simpler. It's easier to travel when you know you need less stuff. There's just less to do, and you can do the more important stuff.
For sure. There is a lot to be said about how much time can pass when you're trying to clean and maintain a home. So it's definitely understandable. Do you mind adding and sharing a little bit more about the decision to move into an RV and what that's going to look like and those types of things?
Yes. So I had just kind of making the vision of like, what do I want my life to be looking like? Um, and so part of that was, hey, I have some friends I want to be closer to. They're having their first child. And I was like, I want to be involved in that. Plus, they're just my great friends and I enjoy hanging out with them. So why not live close to them? And trying to figure that out also amidst while really being confirmed in my suspicion that medicine is not the field for me and how to make that pivot away from healthcare permanently. So part of that, you either earn more or you spend less. And so that to me, I originally was considering buying a rental property, renting out a spare room, things like that. And I still just couldn't quite sit with what the mortgage would be. So it just kind of popped into my head about what about an RV? That happy medium between the apartment size and cost, but then I don't have to have a landlord and it's even cheaper and I still own something.
Well, I hope that that goes really well for you, that transition, and looking forward to hearing about that in the future.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And you touched on something there too, where you came to the realization that medicine is not necessarily the best fit for you long term going forward. Do you mind sharing some of your thoughts about that, how you came to this conclusion, what you learned throughout your PA career that led to that?
Yes. So I should say during my time in my total joints practice, I just kind of began to feel, at the time, I would have described it as burnout, but I have since learned what harder burnout is or more significant burnout is. But just this discontentment and this fatigue with clinical medicine, which is what caused me to leave that in the first place. So I left that a couple of years ago, right when I got married. And then when I later got divorced, I needed to go back into medicine a few months ago. And I really had space to compare the two of like, what is McKenna like not in medicine versus what is McKenna like in medicine? And as I was leaving the total joints practice, I was like, McKenna likes to do puzzles, and I really like to do deep work and think creatively. And I do very well with having time flexibility. And so I was originally looking into like remote work. I learned to code, did some administrative work for a couple of years, and then just like returning back into that environment and I'm even working part-time now and still feeling that fatigue of just having patient after patient. There's no way to adjust based off of my energy levels or to do deep work because I'm doing the same thing all the time. And so I was like, yeah, that's not how I am wired. So time for me to go.
That's understandable. I appreciate you sharing your perspective and the insight that you've learned over your time practicing.
Yeah.
And you have demonstrated how you've benefited from being on the way to financial independence, even though you haven't fully become work optional quite yet. Over the years, what types of opportunities and benefits have getting your finances in order and pursuing financial independence actually allowed you to do?
I think the biggest thing is just that like flexibility and the fact that I even had options. So no one likes feeling stuck. I think what's even worse is when you come across an idea that you're like, oh, that sounds amazing, and there's not a feasible way to do that. So I think one of the first examples is when I got married, we spent a month on our honeymoon. And that was right when I had quit my job. My husband was self-employed, and so we could afford that. That was fine. We could take a month off from work. Same thing when we decided that Arizona was not the place we wanted to live. Okay, well, we can handle a few months without income. Where do we want to live? And so we packed up all of our stuff and moved across the country. Um, and I think one of my biggest ones was as I re entered healthcare and was in the tattoo removal industry, I experienced severe burnout. And because of my, pursuit of financial independence, I had the ability to take a sabbatical for about 8 weeks and then come back to a job that was only part time. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have savings and lived a lifestyle that cost six figures.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that even though you're not fully financially independent, where work is fully optional, you definitely have set yourself up to be able to have lots of flexibility with your time, with your energy, and be able to take long honeymoons and time off and all those things. So that really is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, when you took time off from practicing as a PA, what all did you learn during that experience?
So it took a little bit to drop the identity of being a PA. And there was a little bit of dealing with the backlash of what are you doing? But then I also really, in navigating that, got to really become confident with my own decision because they weren't things that I found to be super logical. And ultimately, as I went through the process, I got to see and give myself evidence of why this was the right decision and how much of a better person and how much happier I am doing different type of work than medicine.
Sure.
So that was a big one. Oh, I think it's also important as people who are pursuing FI is that one thing that people struggle with is what do they do when they stop working and their identity is so tied to their work. And that helped me get a little bit of a practice of it. Actually coming back into medicine, it was very strange to be back in that environment where having this title has this little air of prestige. And I was like, I don't really care. Like I just kind of forgot that was a thing. So I think it's making this next career transition easier. And I think will make financial independence easier as well. So you kind of start to give yourself the other titles of, oh, I'm a great friend. I'm a generous person. I'm a traveler. I'm a Christian. I'm a baker. You get to give yourself the other half. And it also just like gave me time to experiment. I learned to code. I worked in real estate for a little while. I did administrative work. It just was really a good time to know myself while not being so just caught up in healthcare culture and also just like being super busy all the time.
Yeah, it's true that many people, once they actually hit financial independence, they often can be unhappy and unfulfilled and not content because they did not figure out where their identity lies outside of their work. So it really is amazing that you have been able to do that already so young and so early on your way to the point of financial independence, where that transition will very likely be a whole lot less painful for you. And you may choose to still spend your time doing the deep work that you want to do and whatever your purpose is and whatever lights you up once you reach financial independence down the road.
Yeah, honestly, at this point, I think financial independence will just kind of be this little cherry on top. Because once you take the approach of like, I have this dream life and I'm just going to go after that, the money just shows up. It really does.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to when you returned to medicine and you mentioned that you went through this phase of extreme burnout. I'm curious, what do you think led to the burnout? Because it sounded like you were working part-time even at the time. So, what do you think led up to that, or what caused it, or what contributed to it?
Yeah, so my first job back in healthcare was a full-time position, and there's a little bit of like the work environment. I believe you did a red flags episode, and I was like, wow, I needed this 3 months ago. I went into a practice that they had lost their provider like 3 or 4 months before, and they didn't onboard me very well. I just got dumped into having a full patient load with an EMR that didn't work particularly well, or their scheduling wasn't well done. There was absolutely no room for error. And so for me, I felt like I had to be on the ball all the time. And there was this ongoing need for, I had to be preparing charts for the next day, dealing with the patients I had that day, and then completing their charts. And it felt like 70 different to dos to do every day. And I only had so many hours, and it's not like I really had an admin time anywhere. So part of that was the work environment. And then like that lack of sense of progress. That's one of the things I love about problem solving and deep work, is that you have something that lasts. And with tattoo removal, I honestly, a lot of clinical roles, it's just I'm doing the same thing over and over, kind of stuck on the hamster wheel. And it just wasn't super purposeful for me as well. Most people's lives aren't changed by having their tattoos removed, and it's not a particularly um, fun process. And then administratively, there was just this clear preference of, we care about our client, not about our providers. And when you threw all of that together, I just became not a human being afterward.
Really sorry to hear all of that. That definitely sounds like a pretty awful environment. And it does emphasize the importance of making sure that whenever you're job searching, to be looking out for red flags and interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, to make sure that it's a good fit. But sometimes you don't truly know that until you're actually in the environment.
Yeah, definitely don't know it. And yet, all said and done, I'm really glad that I went through it. It was a trial that I needed to go through and put me in a better spot. So, still do your research though, everybody. Don't walk yourself into hardship.
I believe it was after that role that you decided to build up the courage to say no for now and actually take a sabbatical from medicine. Is that right?
Yes, best decision I've made in years.
Let's talk about your sabbatical. How long were you on sabbatical for? What did you learn throughout it? And then how were you able to help those close to you during your sabbatical too?
So, I think my sabbatical in total was 8 or 9 weeks, somewhere in there. It was like late July to mid to late September. I got to feel what it was like to not be in a state of hypervigilance. Being in that like all going all the time was really great to just decompress. I remember one day I started to get anxious about something, and the fact that I could identify that I was anxious, I celebrated. I was like, oh, you are noticing, which means you weren't anxious before this moment. I also learned a lot about who I am and what I like to do. My sabbatical also came shortly after my divorce. And of course, that's just a time where you do a lot of self reflecting and you have no one else to deal with. So I just got to finally to breathe and be like, okay, what do I like? And again, I'm kind of an experimenter. And so when you have time on sabbatical, you get to try things. So I did a little bit of, I tried solo travel for the first time. I got to really just kind of learn that I like to be a learner and accept that that is a hobby and that's a thing. And then in terms of like my family and my friends, one of the things I really enjoyed about the sabbatical is that I was just available for people. And what I really like in my life is having those deep, messy conversations with people and taking all of those bits of knowledge that I have from all the podcasts and all the reading and to help people grow. And so that would just be like long walks with people, working through just like what's our struggles in life. My mom one time was having a bad day and she called me at like 1:30 in the afternoon and we talked for like 2 hours. And so to be able to serve in that need, or in that way, it just lighted me up. And so I get to take those reflections and use them moving forward of like, okay, this is what I want my life to be like. I want to be the person who's learning. I want to be the person who's available. And I like margin so that I can I don't mind being busy. I don't like being rushed. And being just away from all that stress, you kind of get to see that. And I got to really learn that my brain actually gets really creative when I have time to just sit and think. And again, those are all just things that are particularly for me that work well. And I don't think I would have gotten that had I not just had the space to reflect on that and to really be purposeful about like, hey, how am I designed? What works for me here? And then be able to use that moving forward.
That's so great that you were able to use part of your sabbatical to help others and serve others and spend more time and foster those connections as well with those that are close to you in your life. And I also love how you recognize the power of thinking. Thinking really is a superpower that we absolutely do not get the luxury to do enough. And people think all the time, oh, thinking that's free, that's easy. But truly, in American society especially, we're so go, go, go. And then you add a medical career, so rushed, so go, go, go. You're stressing out about your patients. You're trying to rush to the next thing. And like you said, we just don't do enough thinking. And that really is where the creativity comes in and allows for that reflection, that inner work for you to decide what the rest of your life looks like, or at least the next part of your life looks like for you.
Yes, I'm just such a fan of thinking. I love how you just kind of put a bow on that. I just need to have built-in thinking time. Like just put it on your schedule, and it's amazing what I think that's why people have great epiphanies in their shower is because they're actually thinking. It's like imagine that, but that is literally all day. And then it's amazing. Like we are intelligent people. We just need to just pause and be still, and that's okay, and that's a good thing.
For sure. And it can be a challenge for those of us who run towards the type A side of things to recognize that you don't have to be productive constantly, and that resting and pausing and being still and thinking are all essential to life too.
Yes, 100%. I am still in my productivity era some days. That's definitely an ongoing battle for me. Relate to all of our type A ladies.
For sure. Well, McKenna, I really appreciate that you came on the show to share your story. You shared a lot of amazing things that you've learned through some challenges and demonstrated resilience. And I can't wait to see the next era for you coming up here. Do you mind sharing how the listeners could find you, can connect with you, those types of things if they'd like to reach out?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm most active on Instagram, McKenna830. And then I also do financial coaching for healthcare providers that are wanting to make a pivot or life shift and spend more in line with their values. So you can send me an email for that at mckenna.truenorth McKenna@gmail.com.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thanks again for joining us for the show and sharing your story, McKenna. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you decide to continue to join me along this journey of becoming a PA the FI way. Please take a moment to press the subscribe button on the platform that you are listening to this on, but more importantly, consider sharing with another current or future PA that could benefit from the information that we reviewed in this episode. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Until next time.